Okay, so welcome back to you guys. I'm going to move into this next topic to be able to help you guys understand what enlightenment is. If somebody came to you and they said, "Hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai?" Probably the first thing you say is, "Well, what is Chiang Rai?" If you didn't know, right? And then you would ask questions about what this place is. And then somebody would say, "Oh, it's this city in the north. It's above Chiang Mai. You've got to travel through the mountains and you travel for about 3 hours. And then when you get there, you're going to see this, you're going to see that, you're going to see this." And you're like, "Oh, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, let's go." And now you'd be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive, you'll actually know that you're in Chiang Rai. Well, the same thing's true about enlightenment, that if you're going to be interested in going to get to this point where the mind is enlightened, you'd like to know what it is first. Right. And then by knowing what it is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you attain enlightenment, you'll actually know that your mind is actually enlightened. But if you didn't know what enlightenment is, then how would you be able to navigate your way to it? And how would you know that you've attained it once you've actually attained it? So by understanding what enlightenment is, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. So I'm going to be teaching you about what this topic is, and then I will be pausing it multiple times through this talk to give you guys a chance to ask questions. So feel free to ask questions. And by the way, these microphones, there's a few enough of you guys. You guys could probably all have a microphone, and that way you just have it ready for you. If you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to keep it with you. Okay. So the first thing to share with you guys about this topic of enlightenment is that it's very challenging for the mind to understand what enlightenment is in the unenlightened state. It's kind of like if I sat here and you've never had chocolate ice cream before, and I tried to explain to you what is chocolate ice cream, you'd know more about what chocolate ice cream tastes like after our conversation than you did before, but you won't fully understand what chocolate ice cream tastes like until you taste it yourself. So you're going to learn more about what enlightenment is as I talk with you here today, but you're not going to 100% know what enlightenment is by the end of our conversation. So just understand that. But as you're starting to experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment, you'll start to understand it more and more about what it actually is. Okay, so feel free to ask any and all questions that you like. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you attain in this life where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind is stable, steady, it's unshakable. The mind is calm and relaxed, but yet attentive and alert. When we say calm and relaxed, usually people think like, calm and relaxed. Right? So yes, the mind is calm and relaxed, but it's attentive, it's alert, it's sharp, right? And the mind has eliminated 100% of all discontent feelings. You will no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, and all those other feelings are completely eliminated from the mind. The mind is steady, concentrated, and stable. It's unshakable. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer be reborn in the cycle of rebirth. Now, as you heard me share, everything in the teachings of the Buddha are based in wisdom. There's nothing that's based in belief. So even the cycle of rebirth is actually something that you can independently verify. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence that there's only one life, other than the fact that at this current time, you can't remember your previous lives, perhaps. But if you've ever had deja vu before, where you maybe were doing something and it seemed utterly familiar to you, and you know it wasn't in this life that you've actually done that thing, this is your residual memories surfacing to the front of your mind, the forefront of your mind, where these are live previous life memories that are bubbling to the surface of your mind. So there's multiple ways to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. It's in volume 11, chapter 105, where I have 17 different criteria of how you can independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because normally people study for about 2 years or so before they get to that point. So even though you're going to hear me mention the cycle of rebirth here and there, in this particular course, I don't go into it in a lot of detail because you can really just set it aside. You're never interested in believing in the cycle of rebirth, but just understand that by getting to enlightenment, you won't experience continuous rebirth, because an individual who's unenlightened, they will continue to come back into the world over and over and over again, experiencing the world until they cultivate enough wisdom to escape out of it. And we've all experienced countless births prior to this one. This is not your first existence in the world. So just understand that you'll hear me kind of talking or mentioning the cycle of rebirth here and there in this talk, but it's not something that I really go into a lot of detail in this particular course, because it's more something that you focus on later as you develop, and you never are interested in believing in it. Okay, so you can attain this mental state during your life, but you can also attain it at death as well. You can attain this from your human existence or also the heavenly existence too. And once again, these realms that the Buddha taught, those are independently verifiable as well. So ideally, you would attain enlightenment long before death, because then you'll experience those qualities of enlightenment all throughout the rest of your life. But you can experience it at death too, and that would be the next best option, because then at least you're not coming back into the world and experiencing the difficulties and struggles over and over and over again. So by the time you've gotten to enlightenment, you've freed the mind of something called craving, anger, and ignorance. You're going to learn about this on Wednesday morning. These are pollutions of the mind that you can actually uproot and eliminate out of the mind. When we talk about enlightenment, we sometimes describe it as a purification of the mind, where you're purifying the mind. And this is what you're purifying the mind of, is these particular pollutions. There's a deeper level of detail that I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment, which is called the 10 fetters. But when we talk about it from a high level, we talk about it as the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires of craving, anger, and ignorance. And you'll learn more about what that is as part of the course. So while enlightenment is a mental state that you attain during your life, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind to eliminate these pollutions, so that then you can experience the qualities of the enlightened mental state. Sometimes people describe enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. Even though there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state, I don't describe it as happiness, because you know what the happiness is that you experience now. What you're experiencing now is conditional happiness, that based on some condition, you will then experience happiness. So if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy, right? Or if your bank account balance is up here, you'll be happy. Or maybe if your mom calls you and says, hey, I'm going to come visit you today, maybe you'll get happy, right? That's called conditional happiness, that there needs to be some condition met in order for you to be happy. That's the reason why you actually haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because your happiness is conditional, and that condition is not permanent. So if you get happy because it's sunny, that means when it rains, you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if you get happy when your bank account balance is up here, that means when it goes down here, you'll be sad or frustrated. So conditional happiness, you're kind of bouncing off the walls and so happy, so excited. That's not what the enlightened mental state is. You're beyond this conditional happiness, where you're experiencing unconditional happiness, unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for the mind to experience that happiness. So you'll learn more about this unconditioned happiness as we talk, and helping you to understand this more and more. So some people describe enlightenment as this ultimate bliss. What they're typically describing is what we refer to as the jhanas. Before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's these 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through. These are called jhanas, where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind, and you'll be able to see that your mind's doing this. When you get into the first jhana, there's kind of like this bliss or this excitement that comes into the mind. And it's like night and day, from being off the path to the enlightenment to when you're in the jhanas. And some people, when they're in the jhanas, they actually think that they're enlightened, but they're not enlightened yet, but they think they're enlightened. So they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. This is where sometimes you can hear people tell you that enlightened beings still experience sadness or anger or frustration or things like this, because they think they're enlightened. They're still experiencing anger and sadness and frustration, and they're describing enlightenment as that. But I can assure you, enlightened beings don't experience any anger or sadness or frustration or any of these other discontent feelings. So I don't describe enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss, even though there's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. In fact, you'll experience way more happiness than you ever did in the unenlightened state. Because in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy when things are going your way. And when things aren't going your way, you're sad or angry or frustrated. Where in the enlightened mental state, you can be happy whether it's sunny or it's raining. If your bank account balance is here or here, you can still be happy. Your mind is unaffected by those kinds of changes. So this is enlightenment. The advantages of enlightenment is that the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. There's this high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You won't be experiencing any of these feelings. The anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. The causes and conditions that produce these feelings have been uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. So it's impossible for the mind to experience these feelings. Sometimes when I talk about this, people think that you must be feeling mundane or kind of flat when you're in the enlightened mental state. This isn't actually true. Your mind is bright, cheerful, radiant, glad, and uplifted at all times during your day. And there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for the mind to be experiencing this. The mind is no longer experiencing these discontent feelings. The mind will have a deep wisdom that other people don't have, that there's certain wisdom about the world that you will have as an enlightened being that other people won't actually have. And this is where you really need to keep your ego in check, that you don't become arrogant and prideful and boastful, because you'll see the most simplest issue that people are struggling with, and they think it's the most difficult thing in the world that they've ever dealt with. And you'll look at it and you'll be like, this is so easy. Like, you just got to do this, or you just got to do that, or you just fix it this way or fix it that way. But they'll really be struggling with it. So you'll have this deep wisdom about the world that other people don't have. You'll also be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful with countless people, with everybody and anybody. Where in the unenlightened state, you'll find that to be difficult. There's probably certain relationships that you have where you're impolite, you're unkind, you're unfriendly, and you're disrespectful. And whenever you put that out, it just is going to come back to you. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody. The mind is able to do this with ease. You're not going to be causing any harm to the people around you. And because of this, you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. But in the unenlightened state, when you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to people, it'll damage your relationships, and all of that stuff will come back to you. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not doing that anymore. You're being polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody for an extended period of time. And therefore, all your relationships are all harmonious. So you'll be able to see these types of benefits as part of getting to this enlightened mental state. You'll get to the point where you're not even able to have a bad mood anymore, that it's physically impossible for you to have a bad mood. So these are just some of the advantages of getting to enlightenment. The way that you get to enlightenment is you focus on these core central teachings to get started. And I'm going to actually be sharing these with you as pretty much as part of this course. You're going to be learning pretty much most of these things, like the 3 universal truths, 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and 5 precepts. I'm going to be sharing all of that with you as part of this course. I'm going to be kind of referencing what's called the Brahma Viharas, but I'm not going to teach it in this course. It's in the book. It's in chapter 14, but it's in the next course, the Harmony and Relationships course, which is what I teach about 4 times a year. This Brahma Viharas, these are 4 healthy mental states that are going to antidote certain symptoms in your mind. This is where the Buddha kind of gets the description of and the reputation of being like a doctor, because there's certain symptoms that he saw in the mind, and then there's a certain prescription or a certain antidote that he applies in order to be able to combat that and take care of it. Well, you are your own best doctor. If you understand what the symptoms are and you understand what the prescription is, well, you live with this mind every day. You can actually apply the prescription. So you can actually be your own best doctor. So eventually you're going to need to learn the Brahma Viharas, because these are 4 healthy mental states that are going to be able to help you eliminate certain unwholesome qualities about your mind. Then there's something called the 10 fetters. I'm going to introduce you to these here in a moment so you can understand what these are. There's something called the 7 factors of enlightenment. This isn't to determine whether you are enlightened or aren't enlightened. This is actually a tool to fine-tune the mind and kind of bring it more and more towards the middle where the mind's enlightened. And then you're going to need extensive meditation training. And as you're learning these teachings, as you've heard me share already, you're not interested in believing them. You're learning, examining, and investigating. You're reflecting to verify if they're true or false, and then you're practicing the teachings. And I'm going to show you how to do this tomorrow with the very first teaching and all the other teachings that I share with you as part of the course. I'll show you how to learn it, how to reflect on it, and then how to practice it so that way you can experience the results. So do you guys have any questions up to this point about what enlightenment is? No questions? You have a question? Yes, ma'am.
one question.
Mhm.
I have misunderstood it or have the wrong idea. But when you were explaining enlightenment a few slides before, um, so I've heard that this thing of the Buddha. So when the Buddha dies, um, he reincarnates into another person, like birth, starting to born. Is that true? Or when the Buddha is enlightened, as I've understood you, he doesn't rebirth.
Yeah, that second part is the accurate part. And I can show you in his original words where this is the truth. And then you're not interested in believing me, you're not interested in believing in the books. You can actually independently verify this for yourself. So he taught that once you get to enlightenment and die, he doesn't actually say what comes next for an enlightened being. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He says it specifically. He says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he points to the Four Noble Truths and he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives you 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of the things is what happens to an enlightened being after they die. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching because his path isn't about an afterlife. His path is about getting to a wonderful life now. So he doesn't describe what comes next. But for an enlightened being, your mind's so peaceful and joyful, it doesn't matter what comes next. If there is something next, great. It's either better than what you're currently experiencing or, the same or better than what you're currently experiencing. And if it's there's nothing next after enlightenment, okay, so what? Because what you're doing is you're getting to the point where your mind's peaceful and joyful and content in the present moment. Whereas if your mind is longing, yearning for what comes next, you're not actually peaceful in the present moment. You still want what comes next. So he intentionally and wisely leaves it undeclared of what comes next for an enlightened being. So you'll hear other people that will tell you other things, but you need to be able to see it in the original words of the Buddha. So if you like, at our break or at lunch or whatever after class, you can come over and I can show you his original words where he leaves this as an undeclared teaching. And then you can see it for yourself. And that way you'll know what the truth is. Mhm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters. These are the 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. And everything he's teaching you is to uproot these pollutions out of the mind, because this is what's actually keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. This is why they're called fetters. During the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a prisoner and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. What that is a shackle and a chain and a ball. And then they would just keep you in this open field. And now, as a prisoner, you would be confined to that area. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells. Where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they just attached a fetter around your ankle. So just like the individual who is a prisoner, if they release that fetter off of your ankle and you're now free, you're liberated, the same thing is true about these pollutions. That when the Buddha discovered these 10 pollutions, he calls them fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. But when you eliminate them out of the mind's free, you're liberated. Because when you're angry, when you're feeling stress and anxiety, you're not free. Your mind is bound up into this strong emotion. So the Buddha is teaching you how to get free of this fetter, this ball and chain that is around the ankle. So I'll just introduce you to these and kind of talk a little bit about them. At a later time in your growth and development on the path, you're going to need to know more detail about these. And I have different courses and retreats that I go into more detail. But here in the foundational class, I just introduce you to them. So for example, this first one, personal existence view. What this is this is where the mind is clinging to the body and your mind, thinking that this is who you are. The mind is confused. It thinks that this self-image or this self-identity is who you are as a person. And now the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you can only be happy if you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So for example, if you've ever been at a social event and you spilt something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, That's your personal existence view. You wanted to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you could only be content and happy and peaceful if you were being perceived the way you want to be perceived, right? Or maybe you looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a wrinkle or a mole, or maybe you saw a gray hair, or you're starting to lose your hair, and you might have been shaken up by that. That's your personal existence view. Clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, craving for it to be permanent, and now you want to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be comfortable if you're being perceived that way. Then the mind has a self-identity where maybe based on your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, you could be clinging to any of this as who you think you are as a person. Like I am Chinese, or I am Canadian, or I am American. Any of this I am. Like maybe I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I'm a husband, I'm a wife. And now as long as you're in that relationship, you feel great, right? There's a certain level of comfort. But then when you guys break up, your mind doesn't identify with I am single. And now you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because you felt uncomfortable being single. Or maybe you're doing a job or occupation, like I am a police officer. And you identify that way as who you are as a person. And now as long as you're doing that job, you feel great. But maybe 10 years in, 15 years in, you get injured, maybe you get fired, maybe you retire, and you're driving a taxi. And your mind's identifying with, I am a police officer. And now you're struggling and feeling like less of a person. You don't feel whole anymore because you're identifying with this job or occupation as who you are as a person. And when you retire, you might really struggle during this period because the mind's holding on to this job or occupation, thinking that this is who you are as a person. So if you were holding on to your identity as a nationality, like say, I am American. If you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's saying something very fond about Americans, maybe they're talking very politely and very respectfully, and they're like, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. You're like, wow, they're talking about me, and you feel so happy. But it's only a matter of time before somebody says something degrading and disparaging about your nationality. And now you're going to be frustrated and angry and irritated. So as long as you've got this personal existence view, thinking that this is who you are as a person, your mind can't be peaceful and joyful permanently, because it's only a matter of time before somebody says something about this body that you get frustrated or angry about. Maybe somebody says, wow, you look so beautiful. You look so handsome in that shirt. It really brings out the colors of your eyes. And you're like, wow, they're talking about me. But then it's only a matter of time before they say, where did you get that haircut? Are you going outside looking like that? Right? And now you're frustrated and angry about it. Right? So as long as you have this personal existence view, you can't be peaceful and joyful permanently. So the Buddha teaches you how to get rid of this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. And there's also other times where I talk about it in a lot of detail. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings and the ability of them to attain enlightenment. When someone comes to the path to enlightenment, they typically have doubt. It's normal to have doubt. And if you have doubt, that's okay. You can just admit it to yourself that you have doubt. But you don't eliminate your doubt through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you eliminate your doubt about the teachings is through investigation and examination of the teachings. If you investigate and examine the Buddha's teachings, you reflect on them to verify if they're true or false, and then you start practicing his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life, you'll get to a point where you have no doubt that these teachings are actually working to improve the condition of your mind. You'll get to the point where you have confidence in the Buddha, you have confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community that you're part of. You'll have confidence in your teacher, and you'll have confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment. Because oftentimes you can doubt these things. You might doubt the Buddha. Did he really live? Was he really in existence? You might doubt his teachings, or you might doubt the community that you're part of. You might doubt me as a teacher and my ability to help you to get to enlightenment, or you might doubt your own ability to get to enlightenment. Can you really do it? Right? But by the time you're gradually training your mind and investigating these teachings, and you're seeing all these improvements to your mind and to your life, you'll have no doubt. You won't be enlightened at that point, but you will get to the point where you have no doubt that these teachings are actually working. So what you can do with this doubt, if you have doubt, because you probably do, because how could you have confidence in something that you don't even know, right? If you haven't learned the teachings, how could you ever have confidence in them? So if you have doubt in the teachings, just admit that to yourself, and you can harness this doubt, and you can actually turn it into an inquisitive mind where you say to yourself, yeah, I don't know whether the teachings of the Buddha lead to enlightenment or not. And now you roll up your sleeves, you sink your teeth in, and you start investigating the teachings. And now this is what's going to lead to the elimination of your doubt. So that's how you get rid of your doubt. Then there's something called wrong behavior in observances. What wrong behavior is there's a certain amount of unwise moral conduct that somebody has in the unenlightened state. Like if you look at your life, there's probably certain situations where you're bitter and harsh and hostile to people, where you're maybe impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. That unwise moral conduct is producing unwholesome results in your life. Because when you're being bitter and harsh and hostile with people, it all just comes back to you. And now you're experiencing that. So what the Buddha teaches you, which you'll learn tomorrow, is how to improve your moral conduct so that when you're making decisions about how to interact with people, you do this wisely, based in the natural laws. And now what you'll see is improvement in what you experience coming back. It's kind of like in the unenlightened state, you have this oil pipe and it's busted and it's spewing oil all over the world. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do is how to shut down that oil pipe so that you don't keep spewing this oil all over the world with this unwise moral conduct. So when you bring your practice up to the level that you see in the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time, for about 1 year, you will have eliminated wrong behavior. And what you're going to notice is your relationships are really improving because you're now conducting yourself in a way that's wise and you're not causing harm through your moral conduct anymore. But as long as you're causing harm through your moral conduct, it's just going to keep coming back to you. So how could you get to peace and joy if you keep experiencing people being bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive and things like this? So by you improving your moral conduct, people will actually treat you in a better way. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll still experience people being bitter and harsh occasionally, but it's very rare. It's like 99.99999% of the time, you'll see that people are going to treat you wonderfully because you're treating other people wonderfully. But every once in a while, you're going to experience someone who's being bitter and harsh and hostile, but your mind's not going to be affected by it because your mind's going to be at ease. You'll be enlightened at that point. So you're going to need to clean up this wrong behavior so you're not continuing to put harm out into the world, so it's not continuing to come back to you. Then there's something called wrong observances. What this is that if somebody had the belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer is somehow producing some type of beneficial results in their day-to-day life, they're not understanding the number one problem that the Buddha discovered in the mind. What he discovered is that the mind lacks wisdom and that the mind needs to cultivate this wisdom about the natural laws. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer that's going to actually help you to be able to do that. Whether you do these things or not, it's a choice for you to make. The Buddha's not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, but if you're going to get to enlightenment, you need to understand within your mind that the problem is that the mind lacks wisdom, that you're going to need to cultivate wisdom. And there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to make your life better. There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that's going to make your life better and help you to cultivate wisdom. So you need to be able to get to the point where your mind intellectually understands that that's what you need to be able to do in order to get to enlightenment is cultivate wisdom. Again, whether you choose to do these things or not is up to you. Maybe you're going out with your family or friends, and there's some big event that you're going to, maybe a social event, and maybe you're going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple, and maybe they're doing rites or rituals and ceremonies and worship, and maybe you're there hanging out, and maybe afterwards you're going to go to dinner or something like that. There's no harm with that. You can go do those kinds of things, but in your mind, you understand that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer is not leading to the cultivation of wisdom for me to improve the way that I make decisions in the world. So that's what you need to be able to get to eliminate this wrong observances. And oftentimes people have already eliminated this, before they have actually come to study with me, because they know that I don't do rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this. And they've maybe done those things enough in other places, and they see that it doesn't actually lead to improvement in their life, that they're still struggling, they're still having anger, they're still having broken relationships and things like this. So there's a potential that you might have actually eliminated the wrong observances part. What sensual desire is that inside your mind, you have what's called sensual desire, where the mind is longing, yearning through your senses, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And when you get agreeable contact through your senses, you get pleasant feelings. But when you have disagreeable contact through your senses, you get painful feelings. Your senses are the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. So, for example, if you're at a stoplight in your car and someone pulls up to you with some music and you hear a sound through your ear, and this is music that you particularly like, and you listen to this type of music, you're like, wow, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Party, 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 party. You're having a good old time dancing in your seat, listening to that person's music. You have this agreeable contact coming through your ears, and now you get pleasant feelings. But then when you pull up to the next traffic light and somebody else pulls up to you with a different type of music, and you don't listen to this kind of music, you don't like this kind of music, you hear this sound in your ear and you get frustrated and angry. It's not the music that's causing that. And it's not the person who's playing the music. It's your sensual desire. Your mind is craving for permanently agreeable contact through your sense bases. And this world is not permanent. It is impermanent. So another example, say you're walking down the street and you smell some flowers coming out of a flower shop. You walk past a flower shop and you're like, wow, that odor smells so good. Oh my gosh, those flowers are excellent. I could stand here all day and smell those flowers. But then you walk a few more steps and you get a whiff of the sewer coming up from the ground and you're like, oh, that's horrible. And you're repulsed by this. This is your mind craving permanence. The mind thinks that it's in a permanent world, but you're going to experience impermanence. The mind's wanting this agreeable contact, when in reality, you're going to experience this impermanence sometimes. So your sensual desire is going to want this permanently agreeable contact coming through your sense bases, where in reality, you live in an impermanent world. And sometimes you're going to smell flowers, and sometimes you're going to smell the sewer, and that's okay. You don't have to complain. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be frustrated. All that is impermanence. Sometimes you're going to hear music. It's like, wow, that's wonderful. That's great music. Other times it's like, well, that person's enjoying it. Wonderful for them, right? And you don't necessarily listen to that type of music. So your sensual desire is where your mind is longing, yearning through your sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact to come through those senses. Your eyes, ears, nose, your tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. Like, for example, in the present moment, you could be thinking about the past, and now in the present moment, you could be having pleasant or painful feelings in the present moment, just based on things you're thinking about from the past. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or the body. It's just the mind thinking about things in the past. And now in the present moment, you're experiencing painful feelings or pleasant feelings. The same thing can happen for the future. That's why the Buddha includes the mind as the sixth sense base, because in the present moment, you could be thinking about the future and you could be experiencing either pleasant feelings or painful feelings. There hasn't been any contact through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or the body. It's just your mind thinking about it. Okay, so this is sensual desire. When your sensual desires are getting fulfilled, you'll get pleasant feelings. But when they're not getting fulfilled, you'll get painful feelings. And one of the things that can happen is this ill will can arise. The anger, the hostility, the bitterness, the aggression. And this usually comes out through your intention, speech, and actions. That when your sensual desire is getting fulfilled, you're happy, you're excited about that. But when you're not getting your sensual desires fulfilled, the mind perceives the problem to be the outside world. The mind thinks that it's outside world that's causing these painful feelings in your mind. So what the mind will tend to do is it'll act unskillful. It'll tend to push people away. This is called aversion, where you push away people or you push away the situation. You might have actually pushed people out of your life, like friends or family. Or you might have been bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control people or pressure them to do things your way. And people might actually be doing this to you too, where they're pushing you away. They're being bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, or they're putting their expectations on you and trying to control you. And this is coming from the mind's ill will. Ultimately, it's from the central desire, but that's what's arising, this ill will. And you can eliminate all of this. There's training that the Buddha teaches you of how to eliminate this. So let me pause here and see if you guys have questions on any of these. Anything you guys would like to ask? Joe? Yeah. I don't know if there's another mic back there, Joe. We have some right here, though. You got one? Okay.
All right, Teacher David, the question is about aversion. So I don't want to necessarily say that I've pushed certain individuals out of my life. I've just removed myself from theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So is that still aversion?
So from the outside looking in, it can look exactly the same, but there's no harm in walking away from a relationship. What you're describing is you've removed yourself out of their life. There's no harm in you doing that, because there's going to be certain relationships that you look at and you're going to be like, it's unwise for me to continue to be in this relationship and I need to leave. Mm-hmm. What determines whether it's aversion or not is what's going on in your mind. If the individual thinks that if I push this person away or if I leave out of this person's life, that's going to solve my anger and frustration, that's aversion, because the mind has wrong view. But if you're leaving out a person's life and the anger and frustration that you have, you realize it's coming from your own mind, mm-hmm. and you've got to solve that, that is having right view, which you understand to be right view, where your mind is understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And now I'm just stepping away from this relationship because I can't solve this as long as I'm in a relationship with this person. And now I'm going to step away and remove myself, but I'm going to maintain the responsibility to eliminate my anger and frustration. But that's not what the unenlightened mind typically does. What the unenlightened mind typically does is, you're the problem, I'm going to get you out of my life, and now I'm going to go on. And that's aversion. So from the outside looking in, it's the same thing. A relationship is over. But it's all about what's going on in your mind. And if you can maintain right view, where you understand those feelings and emotions are coming from your own mind, which the Four Noble Truths tomorrow help people to understand, then that can be potentially a wise decision for you to leave out of that relationship.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. All right. So now let's go to the higher fetters. I want to talk about number 6 and 7 at the same time: desire for form, desire for formless, because they're very similar. What this is where you have a desire to be in existence in either the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, or the human realm or heavenly realms. These are the 5 realms of existence. And as I shared with you, there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You can actually independently verify these 5 realms, but it's probably not something that you have the wisdom of how to do right now. And you don't need to verify them right now, but just understand you can verify these. The hell realm, the afflicted spirits, and the heavenly realm, these are the formless realms. They don't have physical form. The animal realm and the human realm, we have physical form. So if you're in an existence like this and you're longing, yearning for another existence, then that means you're not content in the present existence. I remember when I was a kid, I used to always want to be a bird. I don't know if you guys had this. I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to be a bird. I could fly around and look at people and check things out. This would be so cool to be a bird someday, right? My mind still had desire for form. I wasn't content in the present moment in this human existence. I wanted something else. Or sometimes people aren't happy in their current human existence and they want another human existence, right? So by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have eliminated this desire to continue to exist in the world. But you also don't have a desire to not exist either, because that would be being interested to commit suicide, right? So you don't have a desire to exist, but you don't have a desire for non-existence either. You're content and peaceful in the present moment. And by the time you eliminate desire for form and desire for formless, you will have eliminated your fear of death. that oftentimes people have fear of death. But by the time you eliminate these, you won't have any fear of death any longer. So these are those two fetters, and there's ways for you to eliminate those. Then there's something called conceit. What conceit is the measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself as being superior or inferior to other people, where you're looking down on people. If you're looking down on people, you're also putting yourself below people too. And this is going to be problematic for you, because when you put yourself above people and you talk down to people, people can sense that and they're not interested in being around you, and they're just going to push you to the side, right? But also, if you put yourself above people, it's just as dangerous to put yourself below people, because you go into your boss's office and you think they're so far above you, and now you're shaken up and you can't even communicate well. And now when it's time to staff you on a new project or promote you as a career, they don't have confidence in you, and they're not interested in promoting you because they don't have confidence in you. So by putting yourself above people, you're also going to put yourself below people, and now your mind's going to be shaken up in those situations, and you can't make wise decisions. So you need to get to the point where you just view everybody as being equal. And this is actually going to put your mind at ease. Because if you've ever been in a social situation and there was like this measuring and comparing going on, you probably noticed how your mind was overactive during that period of time. Like maybe you went to a party and somebody rolled up to you and they said, "Hey, what do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer." And it's like, "Really? Well, I'm a doctor." Right? And now like there's this measuring and comparing going on. And now the people who are above you, you're going to talk to those people in one way, and the people who you think are below you, you talk to them in a different way. And your mind's having to constantly switch back and forth like this. Instead, you can get to a point where you just treat everybody the same. Polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. You see somebody outside who's sweeping the streets, and you're like, "Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good morning." Right? You see the king and queen of Thailand walking down the street, which I don't think you'll do. You'll probably won't experience that. But if you do, "Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good morning." Right? You just treat everybody the same. Your mind can be at ease. Whereas if you have this pecking order in your mind, you can't do that. But where this is coming from is our previous existences in the animal world. We actually needed a pecking order in the animal world. We needed to know when we were a pack of wolves, who's the alpha male, who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt. They're teaching us how to survive. If we didn't know who the alpha male and alpha female were, we wouldn't have survived as a pack of wolves. Or as a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's showing us where the food is, where the watering holes are, where the migration paths are. If we didn't know who was above us in our elephant herd, we would just be a roaming elephant out in the middle of the jungle, not knowing how to survive. So in the animal world, we needed a pecking order. But in the human world, when we come into this human world, our mind retains this, and now it causes us difficulties and struggles in our day-to-day relationships, because the ego will block you from being able to practice love and kindness with the people around you, because you'll be judging them and looking at them as above you or below you, and now you find it very difficult to be loving and kind to them because your mind is putting them either above you or below you. So you'd like to get rid of this, and there's certain teachings that you can learn where you don't do that, where you don't go around judging people and looking down on them or looking up to them with such awe and admiration, but you can just see yourself as being equal to everybody. And then your mind can be at ease practicing good, wholesome moral conduct with everybody that is the same. You can just be peaceful, treating everybody equally. Then there's something called restlessness. This is where your mind is overactive, where if you've ever sat somewhere and you kind of like tap your foot or you bob your knee or you tap your finger, you tap a pencil, this is because you have an overactive mind and it's coming through in the body, and you can eliminate this. Or if you've ever had like obsessive thoughts where your mind is just constantly thinking about the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, this is the restlessness in the mind. So you can eliminate this. Then the fetter of all fetters, the pollution of all pollutions, which is actually keeping all the other ones in place, it's often referred to as ignorance. I don't usually use this word, but I just use it because other teachers use it, and you'll know if you ever study with anyone else. But the way that I like to refer to this is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, misunderstanding, or confusion. Because the Buddha wouldn't have used the word ignorant, right? Because that's a derogatory word, a degrading word. An enlightened being wouldn't refer to somebody in a degrading or negative way or a diminishing way. Instead, a better way to think about it is that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It lacks wisdom of these natural laws. And because it lacks wisdom of these natural laws, it goes around the world making unwise decisions, and it doesn't even realize that it's making unwise decisions. It's kind of like the mind just doesn't know what it doesn't know. So the way that you get rid of this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality is you cultivate wisdom. One of the things you need to cultivate wisdom about that the mind does not know about is the 10 fetters. The mind doesn't even know that these 10 fetters exist. That's part of the lack of wisdom that the mind has, right? The mind goes around the world believing that it's other people who are causing you to be angry or frustrated, right? That's because of the mind's lack of wisdom. So you need to cultivate this wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing. That's why there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You can't believe your way to enlightenment, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. But you need to see the truth. So that's why you need to cultivate the wisdom. It's going to antidote this ignorance and get you to the point where you can see true reality and you can understand how things truly work in the world. So any questions on any of these fetters that you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay. So now just a little bit more for you guys. There's 4 stages of enlightenment. As you're eliminating the fetters, your mind's going to move through these 4 stages that you are going to be experiencing increased benefits as you're doing this. Prior to getting to the first stage of enlightenment, there's going to be 4 preliminary phases. These are called jhanas. These are enhanced qualities of mind that you're moving through. But then once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind's going to be progressing from there to the point where you actually get to enlightenment. The 4th stage of enlightenment is where the mind's actually enlightened. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to this as stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And it's actually helpful to understand it this way because there's certain meaning behind this. But today we usually just refer to it as like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment. But here I'll explain to you why they use this. A stream enter is the first stage of enlightenment. And just like a log enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, it's just a matter of time. The same thing is true that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you are going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you will get to enlightenment. So that's why they call it stream enter, because you've entered the stream. And from that point forward, your mind can't regress backwards. Just like a log can't go backwards, it's going to go forward in the stream. It's going to go forward towards the ocean. The once returner, when this individual dies, they're actually going to come back into the world one more time as a human being, and they're going to get to enlightenment in that existence. A non-returner, if they die in that existence, they're going to be reborn into the heavenly world, and they're going to get to enlightenment in that existence. And then an arahant, this is an actual enlightened being. This is how they refer to somebody who's enlightened. They refer to them as an arahant. And then there's something called a Buddha, which I'll explain to you guys what that is here in a moment. This is not a stage of enlightenment. This is an actual unique type of individual. So a stream enter, or someone in the first stage of enlightenment, they've eliminated the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior, and observances. And again, if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the world no more than 7 times, and then you will actually get to enlightenment during that period of time at some point. It could be 1 time, it could be 2 times, but a maximum of 7 times. And in this stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly diminished. It's a mere fraction of what it once was. And you'll notice this about your mind, that it's completely diminished, but you still have discontentedness in this stage of enlightenment because the mind's not fully purified yet. But you can't regress backwards from this point forward. It's only going to be forward progress. Then there's something called a once returner. This is where you've already eliminated the first 3 fetters and you've thinned out number 4 and 5. Thinning out a fetter is that it's not as prominent, it's not as strong as it once was. If you can think about your anger when you were a teenager, it's probably not nearly as strong as it was when you were a teenager now. It's probably diminished some. That doesn't mean that you're in the second stage of enlightenment. I'm just sharing with you what it means to diminish a fetter, that it's not as strong, it's not as prominent. So someone who's in the second stage of enlightenment, they've actually thinned out number 4 and 5, while they've already eliminated 1, 2, and 3 up here. And if they die in this stage of enlightenment, they're going to come back into the world one more time and get to enlightenment in that existence. So some of you guys might have been stream enterers or once returners in your last life, and now is your opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment. Then there's the non-returner. This individual has eliminated the 5 lower fetters of personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. And in this stage of enlightenment, you're very infrequently experiencing discontentedness. Maybe once every 2 months, once every 3 months, once every 6 months, you're experiencing just a little bit of discontentedness. It's infrequent and it's insignificant when it's occurring. In fact, the other people around you probably don't even know that you're discontent because it's so minimal when it's happening. It maybe lasts for just a couple of seconds and you're able to get it out of the mind. So you need to be very diligent during this 3rd stage of enlightenment because the mind can become complacent, and you'd like to be sure that you stay determined and dedicated to continuing to apply effort and energy to getting towards enlightenment. So in this stage of enlightenment, if you die, you will actually be reborn into the heavenly world and you will get to enlightenment there. Then if you fully purify your mind of all these 10 fetters, you will be experiencing enlightenment. This was referred to as an arahant, where today we would call this person an enlightened being, where their mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind's been fully purified. All the causes and conditions that are producing anger, sadness, frustration, and all those feelings have been uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. It's these 10 fetters that have been purified out of the mind. They no longer exist in the mind. And that's why this individual is experiencing complete peace and complete joy. Then there's someone called a Buddha. A Buddha is not a stage of enlightenment. Sometimes you hear people talk about it that way, but it's not actually true. The Buddha never taught that. But you'll hear people today that will tell you everybody is a Buddha. This isn't actually true. That the Buddha never taught that. A Buddha is actually an arahant. They are an enlightened being. They've purified their mind of the 10 fetters, but they've done it in a unique way that distinguishes them differently than the average enlightened being. An individual who's a Buddha, they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. You're going to need teachers and guides to be able to help you on this path because you have no idea that these fetters even exist, for example, or some of these other teachings. You're going to need help along the way. But an individual who's a Buddha, they actually don't need any help. They can figure it out on their own. Then, once they get to enlightenment, they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 primary criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. And you can see that not everybody meets those criteria. The last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And you can see in the original words of the Buddha where he says how rare it is that this type of individual exists in the world. So even though today people are misunderstanding, that's because they don't study the original teachings of the Buddha and they don't see what he actually taught. So this is a very rare type of individual. They also have these other qualities too. They have a deep, profound memory where they can remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives too. That, for example, for you, you have a limited capacity in your mind. Where an individual who's a Buddha, they have an unlimited capacity to store information in their mind. So it's kind of like a hard drive. Like if you have a 500 gigabyte hard drive, or a 1 terabyte hard drive, you're going to need to get to the point where when you reach capacity, you're going to have to delete old files in order to store new files. This is why, like in the last 5 or 10 years, you can remember most of the things that you've been doing and what you've been up to. But if you think back to your childhood, you probably just have spotty memories because you've had to delete old files in order to store new files. But a Buddha doesn't have that. They actually have an unlimited capacity. They can remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. And they accumulate all that wisdom to the point where they can get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's how they actually do it because of this particular quality of mind. An individual who's a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of somebody else's mind by spending time with that person, and then they could offer them teachings to be able to help them to be able to get to enlightenment. But they only do this with people who are their students. They don't give unsolicited guidance to people, but they can observe the quality of their student's mind and then help them with teachings. Then they also are a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever it is that they teach, they also are practicing those same things because they understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are their actions. That a student is learning through their teacher's actions. They're learning how to conduct themselves as an enlightened being. So a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. They're going to be practicing their teachings flawlessly. So this is what makes a Buddha. And we refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. Because by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know about the path is the path to enlightenment. The average enlightened being, they have gotten to enlightenment and they're experiencing all those qualities that I mentioned. But there's a few things that they're potentially doing that didn't lead to their enlightenment, and they're still keeping those things around. Like maybe a certain meditation. Maybe this particular meditation didn't lead to their enlightenment, but they're actually still practicing it because they think it led to their enlightenment, and they're maybe doing it out of respect for their teacher. Where an individual who's a Buddha, if they're working on a certain meditation and it works to improve the condition of their mind, they know that this is the path to enlightenment. But if they try a certain meditation and it doesn't work to help them, they will actually discard it. And they know that that doesn't actually lead to enlightenment. So by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment. It's very clear for them exactly how to get to enlightenment. And now they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path to enlightenment for other people to be able to see clearly what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So this is why we call them a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because their mind doesn't have that extra baggage that someone else could potentially have. So any questions on any of this stuff? The 4 stages or what a Buddha is?
Hello. Yeah, I've got questions about the previous ones. How rare is, cross with this type of people? Do they have memories of their past lives to actually know the times that they are going to come back here? Because there is on one of them that there is 7 times, less than 7 times that will come back.
Yeah.
And I think that's all. Yeah.
Sure. So I know plenty of people who are actually in one of these 4 stages of enlightenment or actually enlightened themselves. They're not going to tell you that they're in one of these 4 stages, but because I understand these 4 stages and I spend time with people, I can tell whether people are in a certain particular stage. That's not the goal of the path to enlightenment, is to be able to do that. But if you work with this stuff frequently, you'll be able to tell. Like several years ago, I was at a post office and somebody walked in and I started talking to him and I looked at him and I said, "Are you enlightened?" And he just smiled and he walked away. Because I could tell that he was enlightened. So here in Thailand, you'll run into people who their mind is in this higher consciousness and they're in one of these 4 stages. But in other places in the world, it's not so common because they're not necessarily practicing these teachings. But you'll meet plenty of people as you learn more and more about what the path is in these 4 stages. You'll meet plenty of people. There was another part to your question. What was the other part? Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, remember past lives. Yeah. So on your way to enlightenment, there's the potential to remember your past lives, but not everybody will remember their past lives. That's one of the ways that you can independently verify that the cycle of rebirth is true, that you'll have memories of your past lives, but not everybody's going to experience that on their way to enlightenment. But you could still independently verify the cycle of rebirth even without seeing your past lives. But some people will see it. It's interesting because it definitely helps you to verify the cycle of rebirth. It's not required, but it definitely helps you. But it's interesting because you can see those past lives and you can see certain cravings that you had in that life and how they've made their way into this life. And you can see that, oh, even though these were two completely separate beings, this new being who you are is having cravings from your previous life. And this is interesting, but at the end of the day, you still need to purify your mind. It doesn't really matter. So it's not required to see your past lives in order to be able to get to enlightenment. But it is surely interesting, but it's not required. Yep. Okay, so one more thing here, and then we'll just kind of head out to lunch, is let's talk about how to know that you're not enlightened. This is one of the ways that I teach you what something is, and then I teach you something that it's not, because that'll help you to understand what enlightenment is by understanding what enlightenment is not. So if an individual is experiencing any of these conditioned feelings, then you know that your mind is not enlightened. Now, remember, we're talking about conditioned feelings here, because sometimes when I say that an enlightened being is not experiencing any of these feelings, someone's like, hold on a second. You mean I'm not going to be happy when I'm enlightened? Oh, no, you're going to be happy. It's just going to be unconditioned happiness. You're not going to be experiencing conditional happiness. With conditional happiness, it's kind of like if my mom and dad do this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if I have this much money in the bank, I have this type of house and this type of car, then I'll be happy. Right? So your happiness is shrinking, that you're having less and less ability to be happy. This is why some people are old and grumpy, because they have all these conditions that have to be met in order to be happy. But you don't have to do that. You can actually get to unconditioned happiness, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for you to be happy. And that's what an enlightened being is experiencing, is unconditional happiness, unconditioned joy. So if you're experiencing conditional happiness, that's how you know that your mind is not enlightened. If you're experiencing any of these conditional feelings, like your boss walks in and says, hey, I'm going to give you a $20,000 a year raise. Huh? Are you serious? Oh my God, I'm so excited. You know that you're not enlightened, right? So if a boss walked into an enlightened being's office and said, hey, I'm going to give you a $20,000 a year raise. Oh, wow. Thank you very much, boss. I really appreciate that. That's going to come in handy. Thank you so much, right? You'll still be joyful, but you're not so excited and bouncing off the walls, right? You were already joyful before you even had that extra money, right? You were completely content and peaceful with the money that you have, and now you're just getting more. Right? It's just like, all right, well, great. Thank you, boss. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you so much. Right? So this is conditional feelings. If you have a craving to tell other people that you're enlightened, you're not enlightened. So if somebody walks up to you at like a retreat and is like, hey, by the way, don't tell anybody, but I'm enlightened. Right? You know that they're not enlightened, right? Because an enlightened being doesn't go around being arrogant and boastful and prideful. It's kind of like, well, if you're so peaceful, why don't you just go be peaceful? Why do you need to come around here and tell us? I wouldn't say that to somebody, right? But that's kind of like the mentality, right? Like if you're enlightened, why are you coming to tell us? What do you want from us, right? This is boastfulness and arrogance and pride. So when you get to enlightenment, you're not going to put it on your Facebook profile or your Instagram. You're not going to call your mom and be like, hey, mom, guess what? You'll never believe this, but I'm enlightened, right? This isn't an enlightened being. An enlightened being doesn't do that kind of thing. So if you're noticing that you have that, then you know that your mind's not enlightened. Or if you have complacency, where you're dull and lethargic, where you're lacking motivation or willingness to do something, that vitality and that vigor. If you're lacking that, then you know your mind's not enlightened yet. Because what the mind will tend to do in the unenlightened state is it'll chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. And when you're not doing that, you'll swing all the way to the other side where you're dull and lethargic and feeling lazy and complacent. And if you're experiencing that, you know your mind's not enlightened. An enlightened being can actually maintain their vigor, their vitality all day long. They can maintain their energy all day long. They get sleepy, but they don't get exhausted or tired. Where in the unenlightened state, you'll get to the end of your day and you'll feel utterly exhausted and tired. But an enlightened being doesn't experience that. So if you're noticing any of these things, then you know that your mind's not yet enlightened. Okay? You have a question, or you're just scratching your face? I saw you go like this. I thought maybe you had a question. Okay. All right. So that's everything that I usually share here. And it's basically right about lunchtime. It's almost 12 o'clock. So why don't we just take a lunch break until 1:30? That way we can come back and I'll teach you guys Buddhist chanting. This is actually going to help you to ease into meditation and get more benefit out of your meditation itself. I'm going to teach you the history of chanting and where it comes from. And I'm also going to teach you some of the misunderstandings about chanting. And then we're going to actually do it together. And I'm going to show you how to do the chanting. We'll practice it. And then we'll actually put it together with meditation and we'll actually do a meditation together. So enjoy your lunch and perhaps I'll see you guys at 1:30. Okay? All right. Take care. All right.